Welcome, Mom.
Thank you.
I cite your influence in my life almost on a daily basis. Where I want to start is Mom, Gale Koch, Gale, not Koch, Gale Tilly,
Mm-hmm.
before kids,
Yes.
growing up in Hawaii.
Yes.
So tell me about your upbringing and the important parts of your journey that molded you as a young adult and an adult. Where does it all start?
Well, I remember being in Minnesota, first of all, and I was a year old and running around on a farm. Apparently, it was a grandfather's farm
Mm-hmm.
that I never met. And we were doing something, going somewhere, and I ran toward a station wagon with the door flipped down and broke my front tooth in half.
That was your first memory?
That's my first memory.
And you
And
said that was Minnesota or Nebraska?
yes, Minnesota.
Minnesota.
I was born in St. Paul.
Okay.
So when I was a year old, the family packed up and went to Hawaii. My dad was a minister, Baptist minister.
Was that the reason?
Yes.
Ministry?
Yes, ministry. And by that time, we had 3 kids in our family, and I was the third. And when we got there, my mom had stair-step children until there were 7 of us. So another girl,
What
4
do you mean
girls.
stair step children? Was that
Every year,
okay?
one a year.
Until
So
there were how many? I'm sorry.
7.
7 kids.
Yeah.
Which was pretty. It wasn't like atypical, I would say.
No, it was pretty typical,
Yeah.
especially for families, Christian families. And so I was like a middle child, and I was a quiet child. And so I got scapegoated a lot by my siblings.
How so?
They'd break something and say I did it. I was
You were the
punished.
fall
No,
guy.
I
girl?
was the fall guy, and and I sucked my fingers. I sucked 2 fingers instead of a thumb, and I was just a little kid, but I sucked my fingers until the 1st grade. Um, I think it was like my security blanket,
Mhm.
you know, and
One like those habitual things that kids do.
yeah.
Some girls twirl
Well,
their
to
hair.
make
some
yourself
comfortable.
feel good.
This is
feel,
normalcy. to me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
safety.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I had a couple dreams that were really that stayed with me through my life, and the most vivid one was I was maybe 5 or 6, walking down a street and saw a red balloon in the gutter, and I loved balloons. So I started walking toward this balloon, and the closer I got to it, the bigger it started blowing up.
I remember you telling me about this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Should I go on?
Please do. Yeah.
It had a scary face on it,
Mm-hmm.
and as it got big, and I was almost ready to grab it, it threatened me. And if I held my breath, it would start deflating.
That's horrible.
And when I started breathing again,
Got bigger and bigger.
yeah. And
So
I
what
woke
does
up.
what does that signify? Like, what was that? Is that a helplessness or a lack of control or what?
I think so.
Mm.
Yeah. So I had a really controlling mother, strict with a strap, strict with a strap.
Like a literal strap.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And my father, I was terrified of him. So
Why
stayed in-
were you terrified of him?
well, he was big and menacing, and at that point, he was just like the Punisher.
The authoritarian.
He would come home and Mom would say, "This kid did that," and he said, "Okay, get over here and give us a spanking or something, or give us a good talking to." And I was just like, so I kind of tried to just blend into the background. So I would have my fingers in my mouth, and I would be sitting somewhere in a corner. Yeah, staying out of the way, right? So that was mostly my life as I was growing up until I started going to school. And I loved kindergarten. I loved learning. I was good with patterns and numbers. And in the first grade, I was sucking my fingers behind a book. And one of my classmates saw me and started teasing me. And that was the thing that made me quit. I mean, my mom tried everything. She tried to burn my fingers on an iron. She tried to wrap them with tape. She painted hot pepper on them. My dad tried to bribe me, but I wouldn't give it up. So
social ridicule was
social
what
ridicule will do
just
that.
like that.
Yes.
Isn't that an interesting commentary on evolution? When the whole group or when somebody in the group whose approval you're seeking passes judgment, you can so quickly change a habit because it hurts, right?
Yeah, that's right. Because you feel so uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
But we're social creatures.
Right.
And so it makes sense. Anyway, that was...
so you're in Hawaii now when you started school.
Yes. So we moved to Hawaii when I was a year old, and I grew up there. I remember living in Pearl City and not having any food. We were so poor as a church mouse. And Mom used to feed us lettuce salad, iceberg. She used to give us cooked rice, white rice with soy sauce.
And chicken?
No chicken.
Chicken's a delicacy.
We couldn't afford meat.
Okay,
so we had, at that time, maybe 4 or 5 children, and there were 2 more yet to come. So we were always scraping, and Mom was really pinching pennies, literally.
She was always frugal.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And when she gave us an allowance, it was pennies. It was pennies. Back then, pennies were something. You could go buy candy or something at the store with them.
When was Grandma born? What year?
Don't ask me dates.
But she lived through the Depression. I
no,
want to say
her parents did. Well, maybe
she was a kid.
She was a kid.
Yeah, but she remembers
a
like
young woman.
A time of desperation in the country.
Yeah,
pinching pennies was, and our money went further.
That's
back
where
then
she
too.
learned it from her parents, and they were a bit of. They were hoarders. At least Grandma was. So years later, when I moved back to Iowa, I lived with my grandparents for a while, and they literally had cardboard boxes, very neat, stacked up with aisles through them.
Walking
you
paths.
walk through the house through aisles of boxes.
Do you think that's a remnant of the Depression era?
I'm sure it is.
Resourcefulness. I have to keep everything.
Yes.
I might use it to keep warm later on.
Yes. And they had an outhouse still at that time. And to take a bath, we had a big round tub. And this was like in 1974.
Well, they had an outhouse when I was growing up. There was still an outhouse out at the farm.
Yeah.
When I was growing up.
Yeah.
And people would be like, "Oh my God, they're still you."
Yeah.
They come from a different time.
And Grandma would wear layers of clothing and all patched. You know, shirt sleeves with holes in them that she'd patched.
Wear them to the end.
Yes.
Yeah.
Until they literally fell apart.
Growing up in Hawaii, you went to school. You were shy. I feel this.
Yeah.
I was the same way.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't know if that's something that's in the genes, but I'd rather be observing than be in the center stage.
Yes.
And that fueled in me an anger or an aggression because I felt left out of a lot of things, or that I selectively kept myself out of things, sports, social activities, things like that.
Yes.
And that brought a lot of rage in me that by the time I got to, 12, 13, I was ready to listen to Ice-T and Metallica and fuck shit up. You know what I mean? Can you relate to that?
I can relate to that. I became quite rebellious because not only was I a quiet child, I was a neglected child. Because I had 6 siblings.
Just wasn't time.
And all of them were louder than me or younger than me and required more care. And because I was in the background, because I kept to myself, my parents didn't really develop a relationship with me, So by the time I was a teenager, I didn't want to have anything to do with them.
Yeah.
And at that time, my mother noticed that I was going wild. And she sat me down and said, what can I do for you? What can I get for you to help you go in a certain direction?
Fly the straight and narrow.
Well, not really that. She just wanted to know what I was interested in so that she could channel my attention. And I said to her, too little, too late, Mom, because I really just didn't want to have any relationship with my parents by then. And I was 14 or 15.
How do you feel about that decision now?
I think that it was inevitable. I regret not knowing my mother. Well, after having children of my own and looking back at Mom and knowing how, well, she divorced Dad when my youngest brother was about 6, 7. And
Mark.
Mm-hmm. And so she was working and she was on welfare, and she had each one of us girls, older girls, watching one of the younger children because she was never there. She couldn't be there. And a couple of times she had nervous breakdowns and went away, until she felt better and came back. But my heart so feels for her.
Looking
there's
back now.
no way I could have understood what she was going through.
Sure.
And that's why I've always told you, Keoni, you wouldn't understand it until you've done it.
And if you've never done it.
And we've had so many arguments about that. When you were a teenager, you'd say, why? And I would say, you wouldn't understand it. You'd say, tell me, why wouldn't I understand it? And it's an experience thing. But yeah, I'm very, I wish I could go back and change that.
Would you go back, or do you think that if you went back, and we're getting into the scientific realm here, but like knowing that it could change everything, would you risk changing everything to go back and try to write it, or are you happy with
no?
now,
If time travel was a thing,
mm-hmm.
no, I wouldn't do it.
Just in case.
It's not just in case. It's just because I really do believe that things happen for a reason, the way they happen, and without going through everything I went through, I wouldn't be who I am.
Right.
And I'm very comfortable with who I am.
That's kind of the feedback I get from a lot of people that are successful, and by successful I mean happy.
Yeah.
Where they've come to a point where they see they've reformatted the traumas in their life and reformatted their thinking about them as, instead of being the things that limit them, they're the things that they endured, got through, and strengthened them.
Well, you learn from it.
Right.
You learn from it. And as an example of that, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit here.
Sure.
When I moved back to Iowa, and I could no longer stand living with my grandparents with an outhouse.
How long that happened? How long did that take?
6 months.
Yeah, that's fair.
I made friends with a new girl at school. We were both new, so we gravitated toward each other. And I would often stay at her house with my child, James, as a little running around kid who they loved, and they would babysit for me.
And this was Manchester?
In Manchester, and this was the Cole family. And Patty, my best girlfriend, and I worked together at Manchester Inn. And I would go to her house and leave my stuff laying all over the place. And then I would get huffy with her, and bitch and complain about things. And then finally, she picked up a paper bag and started going around and picking everything of mine up and throwing it in this bag. And I said, "What are you doing? That's my stuff. What are you doing with my stuff?" And she finally handed me this full bag, and she said, "Go home. Go back to your grandparents' house. Don't come back until you don't complain." And that was my best friend kicking me out once and for all.
Tired of hearing about your complaining and whining.
And that was a learning experience that changed my life profoundly when that happened.
It was like the kid that called you out for sucking your finger.
Yeah. Well,
It hurt in a way that changed you.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Not like stung you real bad, but made
No,
you go.
it stung me real bad.
Did it?
Yes, it did.
So
It made me look at myself.
Yeah.
And think to myself, how would I react if someone did that to me? And saw the justice in it.
Yeah.
And grew from it.
You used to tell me that the Hawaiian Islands were different back then than they are now. Now they're pretty heavily corporatized in the tourism industry.
They're commercialized.
Also controlled by the government in terms of where you can go in some areas. Like there's islands you can't go to or that are restricted.
Well, they're not really controlled by the government, but by the people, Hawaiian people.
So there's not access to them. You can't just go to
like
certain places.
Ni'ihau, you can't go there,
When you were a kid, though, that was a possibility.
No.
It wasn't?
No. There were certain islands you could not go to unless you were 100% Hawaiian.
Native.
And that is still the case today.
Is it?
Yes. I grew up on Oahu, and I visited the big island of Hawaii, Molokai. I went with a school group to Molokai. And those are the only islands I've been to. Kauai, the Garden Island, is a big tourist attraction. Lush garden. It's called the Garden Island.
Mm-hmm.
And Maui is agricultural. And your cousin Donald.
Donnie Boy.
Remember him?
I don't, but he's spoken of in legend.
Family lore.
He's been spoken in family lore many times.
He's really awesome. He's a really big-hearted guy.
I feel like I know these
in
people
farms.
kind of in a weird way because of how you've spoken and James has spoken about them, so.
So he lives and farms with his family on Maui. And those are basically the islands you can go to.
But I remember you saying something about Grandpa taking you guys out on like a boat to different islands to camp and stuff, and you just kind of had free reign. Am I just dreaming that up?
You're dreaming that up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Grandpa built a boat.
Yeah, I remember you telling me that.
And we've been on boats, and one of my girlfriends in high school and I house-sitted a catamaran for a couple weeks, and that was really cool. Dad had a kayak, and we would take that out, and we would go to a little island off the coast of Oahu. At low tide, you could walk across.
Oh.
At high tide, you'd have to
canoe,
swim or take a boat. I can't remember what it's called. I want to say Goats Island, but there were snipes, which are birds that nest in the ground, in holes in the ground, and we would go around with a flashlight at night camping. I mean, it was great fun, and looking for snipes. Good memories on that island. Very peaceful. Crags eroded by waves sticking out into the surf, and then nice sandy beaches, and just a tiny little island. You could walk across it in less than an hour.
How do you think do you think growing up in Hawaii shaped you in ways? Or
it did.
How do you think that growing up in that environment shaped you? Because Eric's been to Hawaii. You grew up in Hawaii. I have a Hawaiian name. I've never been to Hawaii.
Eric's been to Hawaii?
Yeah. Remember when you went? You took Eric.
Oh, right. He was just a child, though.
Well, he was like 10, or he was old enough to remember.
What shaped me the most, I would say, is the understanding that everybody, no matter what their nationality is, where they grow up, where they come from, we're all family. There's a saying in Hawaii, when you're describing someone you're close to who isn't part of your biological family, your calabash cousins. And this was very true. I had friends of all races, black and Spanish and Puerto Rican and Korean, Japanese, Chinese, and to know them and to know their families. When you sit down and eat with someone, you realize that you're all the same.
People are all the same.
You're all the same. So that was that really shaped me. I feel that to my core. And another thing that shaped me is there is discrimination there.
Mm-hmm.
In
Of
spite of the
outsiders?
fact
Of outsiders, or
there's discrimination in every way, economic,
mm-hmm.
racial, sexist. But as a white person, as a Caucasian, which the Hawaiian word for that is haole,
Howley boy.
haole, we were really discriminated against. I was. And I recall walking home from school with a big Samoan girl walking behind me, pulling my hair the whole way, trying to grab my purse, grabbing my purse and running off with it, calling me names all the way home, and I was just terrified of her. And that going into a store and being watched, being followed,
Mm-hmm.
obviously followed while you're walking around. Yes, we were white and we were dirty little kids because we were always outside and we ran around barefooted and we had not mud, but dirt on our feet, shabby clothing because we were really poor, and that might have played a part in it. But I learned about discrimination, and before I left, it really gave me, what do you call it when you're not sure of yourself?
Like insecurities?
Yeah, well, insecurities, but feeling like you're not worth anything.
Mm-hmm.
Low self-esteem.
Mm.
Yeah.
Which is a good perspective in some cases because you can empathize with the plight of other people.
Yes, in retrospect.
Yeah, down
But
the
I'm
road.
glad that I got away from that environment because then I understood more about how we are all alike and how you cannot let someone else's prejudice affect you.
Yeah.
Oh,
So, you were a young mother. You
Yeah.
got pregnant with James.
I got pregnant with James when I was 15,
15.
and I gave birth at 16. Yeah. So I quit school, moved into a house on my own because my mom wouldn't have me there. Well, you have to understand. Gwen, who is 1 year older than me,
Your sister, yeah.
she got pregnant first.
Mm.
The following year, Charlotte, the oldest girl, got pregnant. None of us were married. Charlotte married the father of her child after she graduated. My mother was devastated when Gwen got pregnant, and we had a big family meeting, and my father, who was a minister at the time, told Gwen she had to get an abortion. Oh, no
Dun,
way.
dun, dun.
And Mom was crying, and Charlotte and I and Sonia even were hovering around saying to Dad, "You're a killer. You want to kill a baby."
You call
No,
yourself a minister.
It was really a bad scene.
I bet.
And Gwen said, "I'm keeping this baby." That's Donald Boy. And then the next year, Charlotte got pregnant, and Mom thought, okay, long-suffering Mom, but they're getting married, and I have always felt like Charlotte was her favorite, So she was resigned, but sad. And I came home from school one day, and I said to Mom, sit down. I have something to tell you.
And you're going to love it.
And I could not help myself, but I started to smile real big. And that was probably the cruelest thing because Mom started to smile too. And I said, I'm pregnant. And her face just collapsed. Oh, it's so sad. And by then, I was getting high and running around, sneaking out at night, doing wild things you probably don't want to know about. And
Being a young rebel,
Yeah,
an
very
unguided
much,
young rebel.
very much having fun, party creature.
Yeah.
And she said, "Well, your child is welcome to stay here with me, but you're not." And being the rebellious child that I was not going to give up my child because I was going to raise him in every way my mother didn't raise me. And I got on welfare, and I got a tiny house, and we moved in.
And this still in Hawaii?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. This was in Miley.
So how on earth did you find yourself to Manchester? Because Hawaii is one thing. Discrimination or no.
Okay. So the father of my child, James Rivera, James Carlos Rivera.
Carlos, yes.
He was proud of being a father, and he wanted to provide, and he wanted to get married. So he signed up to the Army, and he went off to New Jersey to a boot camp to train. And he was there for about a month before he was discharged dishonorably because James drank a lot of alcohol, and when he was drunk, he would get into fights, and he got into fight with his commanding officer. So he had a dishonorable discharge and came home and got drunk and kicked a hole through my front door because I wouldn't let him in when he was drunk. And I really did care for him a lot, but he came from a family with 7 boys, and every time his mother got pregnant, her husband, Ben, would beat her up. And I knew by then that kind of behavior runs in the family.
Cyclical.
And I was not going to have any of that. So my mother happened to be coming to Iowa to take care of her aging parents. And I went to her and I said, "Can I come with you?"
This wasn't a forever trip. This was just I'm going to go there for a while trip, or
it was just
the wind is
I
taking
had no
me here.
plans. I knew I had to get far away from him where he could not follow me, because it was one of those relationships where we'd get together and we'd break up, get together, break up. And
it's fun. It's horrible. It's fun. It's horrible.
I didn't want to go through that. I didn't want to raise my child going through that. So we talked to the welfare people, and they were ecstatic that they'd be getting us off their rolls. Wouldn't be taking their money anymore, so they paid for us
to
come to Iowa. And that's how I got to Manchester. And when I got there, I went back to high school and graduated on time and decided that I wanted to get into electronics.
Went to Chicago, right?
I did.
For a school?
Before I left for Chicago, I was enrolled at DeVry Institute of Technology for electrical engineering. And because I love science, you know that about me.
I do. I love science as well, probably because of you.
So it had to be something with science. And James was about a year old when I got to Manchester, so he was probably 2 years old by the time I graduated. And I was still a party girl, so I was out in a bar. Oh, I just got dumped by some guy that I was seeing.
So naturally, you find yourself.
So naturally, I went into a bar
looking for society's finest.
No, I wasn't going to have anything to do with men anymore. You know, I was like fed up with dudes. And I used to drink apricot brandy on the rocks. Does that surprise you? That was my favorite drink. When I turned 18, I went to the bar and got my first drink, and I fell in love with that, and that's what I would drink. So, and play pool. I used to play pool a lot. So I went to the bar in Manchester, and they had booths along one wall, and in the back they had a pool table, and nobody was it. No one was there, so I started just practicing on my own. And the bartender brought over a brandy for me, and he said, "This is from Doug." And I cringed, because fuck men, I'm not doing anything with them. But here's a free brandy, so I picked it up, looked over at the bar, saw a big old guy sitting there, lifted it to him to say thank you, and started drinking that.
Now toss off.
No, I sipped it like a lady. Anyway. Eventually, I decided I had to thank Doug. So I went to the bartender and asked him, "Who's Doug?" And he pointed to Doug. Doug was sitting in a booth off to the side with his best friend, Jim.
Jim Ryan.
Jim Ryans.
Jim Ryans.
And I went over there and sat down and started talking to him, thanked him. And he's really good looking, as you might imagine.
I can only go off what people have told me.
Beautiful blue eyes, blonde hair, wavy, long, down to his shoulders. My kind of guy, partier.
This would have been what, early 70s?
75.
Mid 70s.
76.
Full on bell bottoms.
Oh yeah,
Hippie, post hippie culture.
Post hippie, yeah.
Rolling into the disco age and.
I think it was the very next day. I was walking to the store because I ran out of diapers for James. And I stopped at the store and got a bag of diapers. And I was walking back to my grandma's house. And Doug comes in his big Monte Carlo, and he had a hat on. He always had a hat. It was a hat.
Cowboy hat.
Sort of like a cowboy hat, but flat on the top, round, flat brim. It wasn't a top hat, but it was
pretty
that
close,
kind of like a gunslinger hat.
I know exactly what you're talking about. I think I've seen it on a Leonard Skinner album cover or something like that.
Yeah. Anyway, he stopped the car and he said, "Hi," and he said, "Where are you going? I'll take you." And I'm like, "Oh shit." He's going to find out I have a kid and he's not going to be interested anymore. But I'm like, all this is going on in my head. And I'm like, well, that's okay because I'm going to Chicago anyway. We had, I don't remember, Keoni, if this was after we had sex or not.
The car?
I think we had sex on his waterbed, which just was a bladder with water sitting on the floor, and it was cold as hell. So I thought it was shit. He's not going to want to know me anymore. But I said, sure.
So you guys hooked up before he knew that you had James?
Yeah.
Okay.
Pretty sure. And he took me out to the farm, met my mom, met my son, met my grandparents, and I was total hippie. Long hair, flower in their hair, skimpy midriff top, jeans way low on the hips, a bag made out of a towel.
Fun times.
Yeah, and he stayed with me. I moved to Chicago, and he would come up every weekend in his truck with no money to see me. And I thought that was pretty cool. I was also sleeping with another guy when I was in Chicago. He didn't know about that, right? So I left Chicago after 3 months or so because the woman who was watching James for me in the building one over, she was on welfare, and it was a welfare rental place. I mean, it was a tenement.
Low income.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one of her neighbors was threatening to hurt her children and my child if she didn't give him her food stamps. So she came to me and she said, I can't do this anymore. I can't watch your child. I can't take responsibility for him getting hurt. And I didn't know what to do. So I called Doug and I said, can I stay with you until I get enough money to go back home? And he said yes.
And that was that.
And he was living in Dundee at the time.
Tiny in size, but mighty in pride.
That's right.
Dundee,
Iowa.
Yep.
And so I went there with James. And James was maybe 3. I could tell you stories about living in the apartment building with all the DRI students, but maybe another time. When I moved back to Iowa and lived with Doug, Doug was working at a place that was making heavy trucks at Henderson's. So he would drive from Dundee to Manchester, and he had the night shift. And Jim was living with us. Jim Ryan's his best friend. Funny guy. Everything he said was so funny. He'd just have a sore belly from laughing. But he was pissed off at me. And he said, when Doug was at work, he just started telling me off. You know, he said, you know, Doug loves you. And you're just going to leave him just like every other girl he's known. You're going to break his heart, and you should just leave. And I felt like crap, right? So I had all these silver rings on every finger, you know? Does that remind you of someone you know?
It does, actually.
Silver rings on every finger, and they were like rings a girlfriend gave me in Hawaii, and they meant Hawaii to me. So I went out into the cornfield, and I pulled them all off and threw them into the cornfield, and I said, I'm staying. I'm not going anywhere. And I didn't love Doug, but I was going to do the right thing, okay? And his generosity, and he did anything I wanted him to do. He did everything for me. So I told Jim, I'm staying. And that was after a long crying jag, right? When he's yelling at me and I'm crying, and yeah.
Do you ever tell Dad about that?
He knew, yeah. Doug knew that I didn't love him when we got married. He knew that. But after you've been with someone for so many years, you just love them. I'm really convinced you can fall in love with anyone.
I think so too.
You know,
if you're willing, and if you have an honest heart, and they have an honest heart. Yeah, absolutely.
So I stayed with him, and we had many good times together. And he asked me to marry him twice, and I said no. I am never getting married. Never. Marriage is bad. Look at Mom and Dad. They got divorced when she had 7 children to take care of. Not only that, no more kids. No kids, no marriage. I'm a free, liberated woman. You know the drill.
Yeah. You're not going to tell me what to do. Not after what I've been through.
Anyway, we moved to Cedar Rapids. He started working at Harnish Figure. And we lived in a building that his brother David owned. There was a upstairs rental and a downstairs rental. The woman who lived downstairs was having an affair with David, which was another story, and it's not mine to tell. But you might want to cut that out of this.
No. People like vulnerability and provocativeness. I'm sure it's 30 years old.
And we knew it. We knew it, and his wife knew it, and there was a lot of drama because of that.
Mm-hmm.
But Doug and I lived upstairs, and we moved in there, and the person who had moved out was evicted, and she had left like 5 pounds of hamburger in the freezer.
Oh, man. And
the whole place was filthy when we moved into it, and we had to clean that out. And then Doug was working and I was staying home with James, and I was getting high every day because I was bored. I couldn't bear it. I was lonely. I got to the point where I was considering going out onto the street and hooking for kicks. And I thought to myself, what the fuck are you doing? You know, get a grip. And I looked up Baha'i faith because, you know, I didn't go into the Baha'i faith, but my father, who was a Christian, a Baptist minister, came home from a Christian convention one year, and he had become a Baha'i.
Wow.
I
At a
tell you?
Christian convention?
Yeah.
That's
Well,
interesting.
okay. Let me digress a little bit. Dad was a seeker of truth aggressively. So he would go to fortune tellers and cross their palms with silver and expose them as frauds. He would talk to all the different ministers in the area, Presbyterians and Protestants and all the Christian denominations.
All the different people that
he would
don't,
make friends with the ministers of those churches, and they would have long theological discussions. He was a searcher after truth. So while he was at this Christian convention in Washington State, he read something in a newspaper about a Baha'i fireside. Oh, he wanted to go and rip them apart and expose them. This is his words, you know. So he went to this fireside and he started asking them all kinds of pointed questions. And he was at that convention for a whole week. And I think he went back a number of times to talk to these Baha'is. And before he left, he became a Baha'i. So when he came back to Hawaii, the first thing he did, the first sermon he gave was, I have found Baha'u'llah, and if you know what's good for you, if you really want to know the truth about Christ and his return, I challenge you to investigate the Baha'i faith.
What do you think it was? So at that, if you had to guess, or if you had to ponder, what was the point, or what might have been the point that sold a Baptist minister on converting to the Baha'i faith and still keeping some congealment of the story of Christ? What kind of convincing argument do you think he might have been presented that made him go, okay, and left his mind open?
It would have had to have been proofs that logically made sense to him in his knowledge of the Bible that convinced him that Baha'u'llah was, in fact, the promised one of all ages. And I've never talked to him about it. I've had other conversations about religion with him, but not much about that. All I know, and I was a pretty young child at the time, I might have been 9 or 10. An age that was really attached to Christian traditions like Christmas and Easter.
Mm-hmm.
We had wonderful Christmases at our house, you know, like a lot of people do. But he came home and he told my mom that he was a Baha'i, and that was like a trigger for a month-long sob session for Mom. She walked around the house with a Kleenex for about a month, her eyes all puffy and red, because they met in a Bible school.
So she was still a devout Christian at this point in time.
Yes, she was the minister's wife. And to her, Dad was the voice of God, you know? And here he was going to go to hell. Seriously, she believed that. And so she started reading the Baha'i books so that she could point out to him how wrong he was. And she read and read and read that whole month. And finally she read the Baha'i prayer book. And she told me this. Then she realized that it was true. she realized it was true, and she became a Baha'i too. So suddenly, here we are, 7 children. No more Christmas, no more Easter, because when my mom decided something, she put the law down.
That was that.
That was that.
And plus, we got 7 kids anyway, and I can't afford Christmas.
Oh, we had other things that we got to do because Dad was a minister and because he was a good speaker. The Baha'i, he did a lot of things for the Baha'i faith. He organized outings and hikes up into the mountains and fests, and we had a great time being Baha'is. But everybody else, all our friends, had Christmas and Easter.
Right.
And I remember lying to my schoolmates about what I got for Christmas.
So did I.
So I told them I got a swing set. We lived right on the road.
Well, I felt, when I was a kid, I felt they could see there was no swing set. Hasn't been delivered yet, I know. Fragile. Must be Italian. But, when I was a kid, being in a Baha'i family, I felt like there's no way that I'm going to be able to explain this thing.
Yeah.
That was a taste of me, or a taste for me, that I really value now.
Yeah.
Because I feel I have some small perspective on what it's like to be marginalized, or what it's like to be in the minority.
Yeah.
Because people don't understand.
Oh, yeah.
And to have people that you understand, but they don't understand you, is kind of a painful thing. And it's a shameful thing where you're like, oh, what are they going to think of this? Like, I was afraid people were going to think I was like in some kind of cult.
Yeah.
Because kids would. They don't have any kind of, what's that? That sounds weird.
I don't know about that.
Maybe not all of
kids,
them.
but adults.
But the fear is there. And there was even fear within Dad's family. They were Catholics that thought, oh my gosh.
Oh yeah, I was ostracized.
Right. And treated poorly. And it's interesting to me that in faith, somebody could take a faith that's based on the life of a man who's celebrated for his acceptance of strangers. Love. Yeah. And turn it into something that ostracizes strangers and pushes them away. Yeah. But that's what happens, and it happens all over the world. It happened with Baha'is that came to Cedar Rapids from Iran, the Hosseinis, who are fleeing persecution, and it's still happening, even to this day.
It is.
In the name of something holy, we're told, which is
in the name of God.
Right.
Yeah.
But I can relate to that because I always felt like I was in the minority, and I was always kind of like, oh, man, I don't want to have this conversation about religion and all this stuff. And now I still look back at a lot of those experiences in the Baha'i faith. And me, the consummate rebel, I've never accepted any faith, though they have tried.
Yes.
They have they have tried to penetrate my shield of logic, of potentially God-given logic. And proof, and have not done so, but I've never closed my ears. The one thing that I would say that I took from the Baha'i faith that resonated with me as an idea was they were the first religion that acknowledged other prophets. Most other faiths will acknowledge but insist upon your recognition as their prophet, specifically with Christianity. You have to acknowledge Christ as the living embodiment of God.
Christ is
the
first and the last.
Yes, the only begotten.
Yeah.
And anybody that you would, that didn't make sense to me. It seemed like a lot of this was interpretation. It seemed like because of the logic that you taught me, that when you hand down language over the course of hundreds, millennia, potentially, that the messages can be skewed just enough that the tiniest little thing over the course of a socio-economic progression would have this enormous impact. And almost true statements could become just flat out lies in just a matter of time.
Well, and then there's the translation thing.
Right. You're ultimately trusting somebody else's translation, and knowing that a lot of these translations are
flawed,
could go completely different directions based on interpretation. But the recognition of the Abrahamic religions, the recognition of this progression of spiritual development through the ages, and something that really stuck with me is because I grew up. You taught me about Jesus Christ. You taught me about Muhammad and some of these other central figures. And the thing that was really provocative to me about the Baha'i faith, and honestly, outside of some of the writings which I can read now and better understand and better grasp, was the idea that they weren't saying you can't believe in these things. Right. You should believe in these things because they're real things. But this omnipotent being that comes from a source of power and intellect that you can't possibly comprehend recognizes the developmental changes in primitive beings enough to send new messengers through the ages, so that, and it's provocative even more because now that I look up archaeology and some of this archaeology that is accepted and isn't accepted, you start seeing more of this. You start seeing these prophets that showed up in these ancient civilizations all across the world, and nobody can explain why. They all have the same characteristics. They all came in the same way. And that was a really interesting idea to me because most faiths have bet all of the power of their faith on complete submission to it, where this one tried to provide a logical explanation as to why there would be multiple prophets coming almost systematically in time for huge cultural change. And that's something that stuck with me for my whole lifetime, and something that I still cite, and something that I feel like I believe. I can't get on board with any hype train that says mine and only mine.
Yeah.
And
because it's all about love.
Right.
It's all about
the universal,
the maturation of humanity.
And you talked about this with me when I was a child, that the golden rule.
Yeah, it's in every religion.
It's in every religion, and it's clearly stated in every religion. Yeah. It's the tie that binds every single religion together, and it's what every religion says is probably the most important thing. Yeah. And they get caught up in the minutia to the point that they'll kill each other over ideas, ultimately ideas.
My father once asked me if I thought the world was better off with or without religion. And that's the thing, what is religion? Religion is what people have made of the teachings of a messenger.
It's kind of the human embodiment, or the human attempt of embodying that they can't understand.
Carrying those teachings on. But humans can't understand God, and they can't understand that no one human should be able to say, I know.
What you don't know.
I know, and so listen to me.
And I've got
listen to my version.
I have a relationship with a supreme being that you don't. Yes. That's your first warning. Yeah. When somebody tells you that they're more interested in leading a cult and dominating your thoughts than they are actually, transcending human thought.
And Baha'u'llah says, if religion is a source of dissension, you're better off without it. And we have the Baha'i faith, which is a religion, and that goes for that too. Mm-hmm. If the Baha'i faith becomes a source of dissension, you're better off without it. And then there's also the directive of individual investigation of the truth.
You're better off without the faith.
Without the religion.
Not without the religion. Or
religion
the ideology.
Is the construct.
Right.
Is the system, is the institution that men have made around a certain prophet of God.
Yeah.
Anyway, we've gotten off on a tangent here.
Well, it's a big part. I mean, that's a part of my upbringing too.
So I was in this really deep hole in my life, a pit of despair, quite aptly. And so I got out the phone book, which I don't know if you know what a phone book is.
I know what a phone book is, Mom. I was born in 1980. Until about 2000, we used them.
So, and I looked up the Baha'i faith, and I found them, and they weren't very far from me.
In Manchester, they had people?
No, by then we were in Cedar Rapids.
Oh, okay. That's right. Okay.
And I went there to a fireside, and that was the Sieglings, Jim and Kathy Siegling.
Oh, yeah. Sure.
Kim Siegling, they adopted him. He was a Korean boy with a lot of medical issues.
Kim Bayong
Siegling. And
Is Kim still around here?
Yeah,
I
he
swear
works
I've
at
seen
Hy-Vee.
him.
He works at
Are you
32nd
shitting me?
Street
Of
Hy-Vee.
course he
Yeah.
does. Oh my gosh. I've seen him there. I'm like,
He's always happy to see me and gives
Thank
me
you.
a hug every time.
that's awesome.
Anyway, you know, Kim is a gamer.
The next time I see
And
him,
I'm a
I'm going to
gamer.
stop him. The next time I see him, I'm going to stop him and talk to him because I literally haven't talked to him in 30 years.
He's awesome.
Yeah, he was a cool kid.
Yeah. Anyway, I went there to their house. This is before they adopted Kim. And they were having a fireside, which is just a friendly gathering in their living room where anyone who's interested in the Baha'i faith can just ask questions about it. It's no pressure, low key. Just they don't know the answer. They say, I don't know the answer, but I can get back to you when I talk with someone more knowledgeable. Anyway, I went there, and I had become a Baha'i when I was 15, because if I was going to be any religion, it was going to be a Baha'i because it's the only one that made sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a rebellious kind of thing. And I sat there just listening to them, and I just started crying.
Why, do you think?
I'm going to start crying right now.
Good.
Because it brought back to me what mattered to me.
What mattered to
I've
you?
always been in touch with my spirit. When I was a little girl, when I was a teenager, I wanted to be that lady on the mountain with a stick in her hand and white flowing robes. I wanted to be that guru,
Mm-hmm.
you know, because I felt like everybody is one family, because we have to heal the world. And I started crying because I realized how far I had gotten off my track,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and then I'm like my mother, in the fact that once I decided to embrace my faith, I was not going to live in sin anymore. Stop smoking, stop drinking, stop smoking pot. I told Doug, I'm going to leave you unless you marry me. That's how I proposed to him. I gave him an ultimatum, and I still didn't love him, but he looked at me suspiciously, and he didn't give me an answer for about a week. He was mulling it over. And
Like he always did.
well, no, he wanted to marry me. He asked me to marry him twice, but I always said no.
But he's making a careful decision
And so
because
now
of
he's
that.
like, what's up with this?
What changed?
Well, he knew what changed because I was reading the Baha'i World Faith, and I would read it aloud to him in bed at night. And then I said to him, I can't live like this anymore. If you want me to stay with you, you have to marry me. So finally he said yes, and we got married. And we started living the American dream.
Oh, yeah.
I was still not working. Doug was our sole breadwinner. He worked at Harness Sugar.
They paid pretty
Teenage
good while he
Harness
worked
Sugar.
there, right? 'Cause,
Yeah, he was getting really good pay.
Yeah.
So at the advice of Ronald Johnson,
Ronald J.
we bought and moved into a trailer at the Kirkwood Trailers.
Dun, dun,
Dun,
dun.
dun.
I've made similar errors.
This is where you were born.
Oh, yeah. I've heard
Okay,
many
so-
stories about it, and it sounds like I'm glad that I don't remember it.
It was a horrible little trailer. It's not anything like the trailers they have these days. It was cold in the winter, and it was really hot in the summertime. It was like living in a tin can. And I still smoked cigarettes. You know, smoked 2.5 packs a day.
Wow. Glad you
Yeah.
gave that one up.
Yeah, and in a trailer, when you smoke that much, everything smells like smoke. Really gross.
It's like a sponge.
It's like you can't even stand being with yourself.
Yeah.
Because you smell so bad.
That was my water.
Anyway,
The trailer, the mobile home, if I recall, and I can edit this out if you don't want me to, but I remember you and Dad telling me that James pissed a hole in the corner of his room.
Yes.
He'd like go into the corner, like into a closet corner or something like that.
Yeah, I'd appreciate it if you edit that out because that's Jimmy's story.
He would probably think it's
I don't want to
hilarious.
shame him.
No, I won't.
But that's a whole nother story, James, and his hyperactivity. That's a whole nother story. It was so challenging living with him.
Well, and you're a young parent too, so that doesn't help.
And I thought that's how all kids were.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I went to Hawaii to visit my sister, Sonia.
This was after you and Dad got together?
Yes.
After you had accepted the Baha'i faith?
Yes.
Okay.
This is when we were living in the trailer house.
Okay.
And I saw Jimmy's father, and he wanted to get together with me, but I was like, Baha'i, and I'm like, I'm married now. Leave me alone.
Things are different.
Yeah.
I'm different.
And I was.
Yeah. Yeah.
But when I was there, I was staying with Sonia in this really big old, beautiful, old house in Hilo. And it was an artist's house. And she had just had Melanie. Melanie was maybe 2 years old. Cutest little girl. And I just fell in love with her.
She was
It's
cute.
an interesting story, this. While I was there, the Baha'is had their annual election for the local spiritual assembly. And while I was getting high with my sister Sonia,
I thought you were done with sin at this point.
I was done with smoking pot. But while I was there, Sonia, who is an artist, and my little sister, she had some pot. And I used to be a real big pothead, and I just couldn't resist.
Well, you know, pot was put here on earth by a higher power.
Yeah, a lot of things were.
All of the things were.
Yeah.
So there really should be no connection whatsoever between sin and smoking pot, just for the record.
Well, that's another conversation.
It is.
But here I was getting high, and I got a dozen red roses delivered to me with a note saying I was elected onto that body, the local spiritual assembly.
In Iowa.
In Iowa, and I felt like such a hypocrite. But I fell in love with little Melanie. And so when I got back to Iowa, I said to Doug, let's have a baby. I want a baby. Because I didn't work, he did. And he didn't want a baby. He didn't want to have another child. Not with all the hell James put us through. Plus, Donald Boy lived with us for a while.
That's right, yeah.
And you know, him and James went down to the convenience store and ripped stuff off, and we called the cops on them and scared the shit out of them so they wouldn't do it again.
I heard they were a dynamic duo. Donnie Boy and James.
Yeah. Anyway, so he wasn't thrilled at the idea at all. But I pressured him because I wanted a little baby. And thus were you conceived. And I did not stop smoking until after I gave birth to you.
Good to know now. Good to know where those lung problems came from. So.
No, I did quit smoking before, but I was pregnant with you. And while I was pregnant with you, we were approached by a couple of local teachers, high school teachers, to join their Shackley family. Are you familiar with Shackley products? Are you familiar with Amway health products?
Yep.
Well, Shackley is a close cousin to that.
Okay.
It's a pyramid thing. So we thought, oh yeah, you know, because we were just getting into health, you know. And so we bought into it. We bought our distributor kit, and we started buying products and using them.
We're
and
gonna
I
be
was
rich.
eating. Doug was making this. Well, we were in it for the health. We were like, yeah, you have to have a distributor's kit, but we're just going to buy stuff for ourselves. And then we were getting pressured by our sponsors. So, that was making me shakes, protein shakes and everything. So why you're such a big baby. That was why you were such a big
Because
baby.
I was getting pumped full of nutrients.
Yeah, and finally we told our sponsors, we don't want to do this anymore. And they got really angry at us.
Of course.
And they said, why? And we said, we don't like to sell things to people. We don't like to put pressure on people to buy things they don't want. It's different if they want it, but we don't want to go and try and convince them that they should have it.
Mm-hmm.
And they would have come back with arguments like, you sold each other to yourselves. You know, everything you do is a sell, you know, and we're like, no.
The regular sales rhetoric, yeah.
So we left that. And then after I gave birth to you, I was still smoking while I was taking these healthy products. I was addicted to cigarettes.
I know, I remember.
And after I gave birth to you, I didn't want to smoke around you.
Mm-hmm.
So Dad and I, we were both smokers. We took our last cigarette and we put it on the dashboard of our car. And we told each other, okay, now, as long as we have that cigarette, we don't have to buy another pack. So don't smoke it. Otherwise, we'll have to buy another pack.
Jedi mind tricks.
Exactly. And it worked, but also it worked because we started jogging. So we were jogging around this trailer park every day, sometimes 2-3 times a day.
As a means to get out of the trailer itself.
No, every time we wanted to smoke,
Oh, as a habit.
go out and run.
Got you.
So when we got past the cravings, then Dad said, hey, I think we had signed James up for Taekwondo at Jung's Taekwondo. And Dad said, hey, let's go check that out. They have a fitness center there too. So I said, by then I had all the paraphernalia of a long distance runner, and I was going to run a marathon.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so I said, I just want to run. I don't want to do any other exercises. I've never been into sports.
I just want to run. Just let me run.
And I was losing weight, you know, and I was feeling good about myself. So, boy, this is going to be a long podcast.
It's all right.
And so we went and we toured it, and I saw that they had a treadmill, and I thought, wow, that's cool. You know, I could run on that in the winter. And so we signed up. You know, I was resisting the whole way, and Dad was just dragging me along because he was bound and determined that we were going to do this. And he was telling me things like, yeah, you got to balance your body. Your legs are all good now, but you have to balance your upper body. So we started working out.
And this was raw power.
No.
This was not raw power. What gym was this?
Taekwondo.
Oh, so there was a gym in Jung's.
New Life Fitness Center.
On the south side?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
South
I've been in there.
Yeah.
I'm familiar with that. I used to go there. Interesting.
They have a sauna and a swimming pool.
Yep.
And we have...
You know, that's interesting because we were sponsored. Our gym was sponsored by them later.
Really?
Yeah. Hard Drive was sponsored by New Life for probably 5 years. And only when it came under new management, just like 5 to 10 years ago, did we part ways. But the whole time I went there, I had no idea that was where you guys worked out.
That's where we started getting into it.
That's awesome.
Bodybuilding.
So that was another chapter in your life.
Yeah. So
you started that after me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Because I was doing circuit training as well as running on the treadmill. My shoulders, I'm naturally endowed with wide shoulders for a girl. And my arms were like ripped. And I would go into the sauna and people would say to me, wow, you have come so far. You should compete. And I'm like, nah, that's not my thing. And then they would argue with me, but you know, it's a way to motivate yourself to do better.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started competing. And I did that. And I worked out like 7 hours a day, aerobics and weight, for like 4 or 5 years straight.
I remember one of my first memories was with Grandma Mary, and I think Dad might have been there too, sitting in the stands of some local hall or performance and seeing lines of women adorned in white feather headdresses. Do you remember this?
No.
Like, it was like an entrance to a show, basically, is
Uh-huh.
how the show started. But all these women in these white things with headdresses would come down, and I was like, what the hell is going on here? And then they had the bodybuilding show after that. That was one of the first things I remember.
Wow.
Yeah. And I don't know
I
how
had
old
no
I was,
idea
but
that went on. But I was behind the scenes being stressed out, you know. Am I
covered
lifting
in
enough? And
covered in oil and
yeah,
tanning
putting
oil and
oil
stuff.
on, and just my swimsuit showing anything, you know.
What do you think you took out of bodybuilding?
I got a great sense of confidence in myself through that discipline.
The gaining of strength.
Just the discipline
Mm-hmm.
of being athletic, you know. And I was addicted to endorphins.
Sure.
You know, I
The good
had to
addictions.
go out for my run, or I would be cranky.
I can identify.
And by then I was working. I was working at a convenience store, and they sponsored me.
What convenience store?
7-Eleven.
7-Eleven.
It was in town.
Yeah, no longer.
It has since been sold. I think it's now Quick Shop.
It was Quick Stop, Quick
Quick
Shop.
Stop.
It's changed
Yeah.
a million times.
And I won the state championship in 2 different organizations.
Miss Iowa, right?
Miss Iowa.
1984.
God, don't ask me about yours.
It was
Years all
1984.
flow into one. Anyway, Doug was entirely supportive, and by then I was in love with him. You know, we were a couple raising a family, and we were devoted to each other. And I didn't tell you about. That's okay. You don't need to know.
You can't do that. You got to tell
All
me
right.
now.
You remember when I said I was sleeping with another guy in Chicago
Mm-hmm.
when I moved in with Doug? Right away, I told him. And then we almost broke up. I mean, there are so many times during our relationship when we could have just gone our separate ways.
Everybody's relationships like that.
Anyway,
you
it
know.
was traumatic too. That was traumatic too. But I had to come clean.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so bodybuilding years, I stopped competing when I realized that to go any further, I would have to start doing steroids.
Because women at the time, what was bodybuilding at the time in the 80s, what now looks like fitness competition. And now bodybuilding today doesn't look anything like bodybuilding in the 80s because most of them on the pro circuit are pumped full of testosterone.
Well, I started bodybuilding when it was a brand new sport for women. Brand new.
But the look was different at the time. What they were looking
Not really.
for, I thought what they were
No.
looking for was different than what they're
No.
looking for now.
No. They were looking for muscle, symmetry, and abundant muscle. And I had it, but I wouldn't do roids.
You had it to
what
the
I
ceiling
had,
of
it
what you were
was
capable
natural.
of. Right.
It was natural for me.
You hit genetic capabilities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when I realized that it was going into a way of using drugs, Doug and I both hated the look of guys pumped up on roids.
Doesn't look natural.
Well, it doesn't look natural. It looks like someone stuck an air hose in their mouth and blew them up like a balloon.
And the muscle
And
isn't the
then,
same. It's just
if they
not.
stop taking roids, everything shrinks and their skin just sags on them. You know.
Yeah.
It wasn't healthy, and
Yeah.
we were in it for health.
Right.
We started doing this for our health, and so I stopped competing and I started judging, and then as time went on and the steroids basically took over in women's competition as well, I just
Done.
didn't want to have anything to do with it.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of where it is now based on what I've gathered is you have all these different divisions. First of all, you have natural, you have pro, you have this, you have all this fitness now. They have all these different divisions. So it's like, first of all, what am I winning, really?
Yeah.
And how healthy is it if I want to build my body and construct my body a certain way, but they're going to build it with male hormone or human growth hormone? What's the point? I remember hearing somebody talking about the pro circuit and bodybuilding and like Mr. Olympia and stuff, and how they test for drugs for the illegal steroid use. And the way, I don't want people to chew me up and spit me out on this, but essentially it's like this. If you're one of the people that randomly gets tested, the one out of however many competitors, you just go home. That's the way it is. Your year is worth, because you're going to fail. Yeah. Unless you have some magical aligning.
You're the sacrificial lamb.
You're the sacrificial lamb, and people kind of know that. And I don't know how much truth there is to that, but I could totally see it. You're not going to test every single one of those competitors. And then when you see the natural division versus the pro or whatever it's
obvious.
It's so painfully obvious. It's just like, let's have a clear-cut conversation.
I really enjoy the female form, you know, and when it's natural, it's beautiful.
I agree.
When a woman is athletic and has developed her muscles and it affects her posture and her gait and everything, it's beautiful.
Well,
when you start putting muscle on.
People say that's subjective, and I feel like we live in a way more PC culture even than we did before, which is weird.
Yeah.
It's just weird to me. But there's going to be people out there that are like, I think I look beautiful big. And it's like, okay, that's fine. But if you're a female with 125-pound skeletal structure and you're walking around 190 pounds, 195, that's not healthy. And to most people, right, I'm not saying that you look ugly or you should be ashamed of yourself, but to most people, there is an ideal physical form. It's been scientifically documented. And when you take a female that's in really, really good shape, and then you add a lot of unnatural hormone, things physically change with her body and start turning her into an actual man. And I don't think that's attractive.
And then there's the skin eruptions, you know, the pimples and the
acne,
rashes,
backne, all that shit.
You know, and that doesn't happen when you don't do those drugs.
That's one of the big 4-alarm, like the big easily seen indicators. Oh, they've got acne all over his back. He's juicing.
Yeah.
And I felt from my time in martial arts, there are the exceptions. There are people at the highest levels of martial arts that use these performance enhancing drugs. And they have doctors and very, very up-to-date medical research on how to administer them. But then you'll go to health clubs and you'll see just the guy that juices without any, and you can tell the difference in the muscle tone. You can tell the difference in the functionality. We've had a lot of people that have juiced come into the gym. And when I first got into martial arts and MMA, I'd have people come in from my work that were juicing. They're all jacked up. And I'm like, well, shit, this guy's going to be a real handful. Nothing. No applicable muscle whatsoever. Yeah. No functionality of movement. So after 1 to 2 minutes of a big initial like bull charge, they can't even move. Yeah. So what is, I was listening to a story about a bodybuilder whose wife was his manager, and she had to wipe his ass because his lats were so big that he couldn't wipe his own ass.
Wow.
How
is it worth it?
No. For me, it's not. For him, it was. And for people like Ronnie Coleman, who, Ronnie was the GOAT after Arnold, who won Olympia after Olympia. And he was not only enormous, but he was strong. Like, he was actually strong. Now he's basically crippled. Yeah. And he said even recently, I'm crippled. I can barely move. My life is 100% pain. And I knew what I was getting myself into. And it was all worth that trophy case.
And I've run into that attitude with women, too. Whatever it takes to win. And that's...
Whatever it takes means death, too.
Yeah.
And means
they don't care. I mean, whatever it takes to win.
Yeah. That exists in
one
MMA,
spotlight,
too. Yeah. That exists in MMA. The people that will
not worth it to me.
Lay their life on the line, potentially, and they're not going to die, right? But they're willing to, if that's what it takes to get into the books.
Yeah, but then they live the rest of their lives in pain or...
Quality of life is, for me... And probably for you,
Quality of life.
It's quality of life.
Yeah.
And I totally get the suffer now and live forever, a legend or whatever. But I'm like, hey, that's cool, but you're going to be dead. And I'm going to be walking up a mountain. And I'll be going, yeah, you know what? That person is a legend, but I'm still here to recognize it. And that's pretty legendary if you give gratitude for being alive in the moment. So you stopped competing in the 80s. This would have been the late 80s.
Yeah.
I think Eric, right around the time Eric was conceived or born.
Well, by the time I quit before
you
then.
had winded down, yeah.
I quit before then, and Doug and I separated for a few years.
Yeah, that was traumatic to me. That was one
Yeah.
of my biggest traumas.
Yeah.
And we've talked about that.
You went with Dad,
Mm-hmm.
and James came with me, and the biggest reason we split up was James.
I don't think that we picked. I think that it was decided because I don't remember a choice in the process.
No, it was decided.
Yeah.
I decided.
Yeah, because I didn't like it. I was not happy about it.
I felt like Doug was treating Jimmy differently than he was treating you.
Mm.
And Jimmy was the stepson, and he didn't deserve that. And so since he was my son, and since you were Dad's son and my son, but
Mm-hmm.
I had to let Dad have you because he was so bonded with you by then.
Did we go to Grandma's first?
You
into
went
Manchester?
and lived with my mother in Manchester.
Mm-hmm.
And then you moved back into Marion. You moved to Marion.
I think we went to Lamont first.
That could be.
Because I was enrolled at Lamont Elementary when I was 6.
Yeah.
So I think we stayed there for I think it was 6 months, but he
Yeah.
was commuting to 7-Eleven.
Right. He
And
got a job.
clearing
And
no money.
That was during that recession
Yeah.
when he lost his job.
Yep.
And he was working at that place that made printing presses.
Goss.
That
was after.
Rockwell Goss.
So that he worked there after, I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
You guys were both working at 7-Eleven at the same time.
Right.
And jobs weren't coming easy.
No.
And so that was a
I
tough
working
time.
2 jobs. I was working at 7-Eleven, and I was working at a restaurant as a salad chef.
That was tough though.
Monty's Restaurant.
During that time, we didn't have really
Mm-hmm.
anything.
I was living with my roommate,
Mm-hmm.
Linda Gaffney, and you were living with my mother and in Lamont for a while, and then you moved to Marion.
Yep.
And we were apart for about 3 years, but for 2 of those years, we were still lovers.
Mm-hmm.
And Eric was conceived. And when I found out I was pregnant, well, in between there, when I was still running the women's gym before we split up.
Mm-hmm. That was raw power, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I got pregnant, and we decided to terminate it because we couldn't handle another child. And,
What year would this have been? Had to be like 85,
I don't remember.
86, mid
I don't
80s,
remember.
something like that.
Probably 2 years before Eric was born.
Yeah, 'cause he's 88,
Yeah.
so about 85, 86.
So then when Eric was conceived, neither one of us could bear the thought of another termination, and so because we were going to keep this baby, we decided to get back together. So Eric actually saved our marriage. You want to look at it that way, because I was pretty sure I would never get back together with Doug.
Why is that?
Doug was very high-strung, and he was a worrier. He was always, his mind was always going,
Yeah.
and he would worry about every little thing, and I couldn't bear it. In the time
This guy.
that we were separated, his personality changed a little bit. He became a little more easygoing. And maybe that's because I wasn't with him, so that was a good thing. He kind of loosened up a little bit, and I think he grew from it, and I grew from it, and we decided to make it work. And as soon as we did that, we moved into Cedar Rapids, into the northwest side house.
You'd already been living there.
Yeah, with a roommate.
Yep.
And I decided I had to go to college.
While you were working at 7-Eleven
Yeah,
and another
I was
place,
working.
yeah.
Well, I gave up the salad chef job
But you were going to school part-time.
part-time.
Yep.
Took me 8 years to get a 4-year degree, bachelor's degree.
I remember that day.
And because I was going to school, you guys were with Dad most of the time, and my mom was watching Eric as a baby, and she would wheel him over to Aldi's.
Yep. Buy Fig
And get
Newtons.
food. Fig Newtons.
Fig Newtons, yep.
The legendary Fig Newtons. Grandma
Yep.
cookies.
Yep. Have a Fig Newton. I would too. And everyone, you know what's funny? I go into Hy-Vee and every time I roll by Fig Newtons, I think of Grandma.
Grandma's cookies.
Yep.
Yeah.
It takes me back to all those memories.
Yeah. Anyway, so those years are kind of a blur for me because I was working and I was going to school and it was so draining. And
I remember.
I did not have time for my family and it was heartbreaking, but I needed to make more money than I could make at a convenience store. So that was always in my mind for the whole 8 years that I had to do this. I had to get through this, and then I had to get a good job, and I did. And when I started working at the university, Dad also found Terex.
Terex, yeah. It was Rockwell Goss, I think, and then it was No, Rockwell Goss closed.
Right. They
Yeah.
got shipped to China.
Yeah. And it was Cedar Rapids Incorporated, then later bought out by Terex, I think. But yeah, Terex now.
It used to be Cedar Rapids Manufacturing.
Yeah.
And then it's
Making
became
rock
Terex.
pavers and stuff like that.
So in the end, we were both gainfully employed,
But it was a struggle.
and we were able to buy our home.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a struggle. It really was. And as soon as we moved into our home, you decided to leave.
I did.
And then your life started with Tish.
Yeah. So let's take it there then, I guess. How from the perspective of my mother, somebody that knows me in and out and has helped shape the way I think, how do you see me now? I know that's kind of a vague question, but
You're kind of amazing. You know, you set your mind to your core values. You know, really proud of you. I'm a little astonished by you.
why? How so?
Because you cut your own cloth. I don't mean that literally.
No, you cut my cloth. You cut the cloth, this cloth that I'm wearing right here.
You go to the beat of your own drum. To the things you believe in, you stick to them. And I guess I do that too. You know, I guess I've always done that too. Although I did buy into the whole American dream for a while. I remember when I was able to buy my first car, which was, all on my own, which was a Nissan Maxima used.
Nice car. Love that car.
Mm-hmm. I once remarked to my best girlfriend, I'm there. You know, like that was a big deal. And
To a lot of people, that is a big deal.
yeah. But I had bought into the whole work hard and good things will happen to you. I don't believe that anymore. I think now that you just have to be true to yourself and just go with the flow and take whatever comes. Be a leaf in the river, and not try to change that. You know, make the most of whatever life throws at you. But at that time, after years of living in poverty and struggling, it felt good to not have to worry about money.
As much, yeah.
At all.
You say when you got the Maxima, you think that you were like done worrying about money for the most part?
Pretty much.
And that was about the time I left.
Yeah. It was...
Well, it's convenient
I was
time.
making 7 times as much as I made at a convenience store.
Right. After
And
you got out.
Dad was working at Terex, and he was making his money, and we knew we had to keep our money separate because otherwise we'd fight about it.
Mm-hmm.
So I did what we separated our expenses. I paid for the house, and he paid for the utilities. And then whatever else we had left, we could spend what we wanted to. So he became a master at wood turning, and he spent a fortune on tools. And I never said a word. And I spent my money the way I wanted to, and he never said a word. Oh, unless he needed something. Then he would mention that, oh, the washing machine died today. And then I would say, okay, let's go get a new one. That was freedom. That was economic freedom. That was nice, but I'm beyond that now. But that's easy for me to say because I own my home. And I own my car. I don't have any debt yet.
And that is kind of an American dream. It takes.
That's not the American dream that I know.
Well, not the one you know, but to an immigrant coming here from another country.
Yeah.
That's the dream.
To not have to worry about where money's coming from.
Yeah.
To have clean water.
To go buy a Maxima.
If you want one.
You know, you look at them, like if you look at that car, for us, it's like, oh, that's a nice car. But
Yeah.
for somebody, like for the majority of the world,
Yeah.
it's an amazing thing,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
So most of the success that I owe, I don't want to say most of it, I say all of it, really comes down to my parents. I really believe that now. I believe that the influences that you and Dad instilled upon me led to everything that I could ever claim to be a measure of success, because whenever I was talking to Lonnie just a little bit ago about this, like we did a 30-minute sparring match, and we always do this every Wednesday. We call it old man rounds, and we sit at the corner of the mat, and like I'm looking at Eric's kickboxing class, and there's like 25, 30 people in it. You know, many of them I know, some of them I haven't even got to know yet. Over on the other side of the mat, there's this Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu program, training, you know, people that I've coached that are now coaching. And when I think of things like that, first of all, it trips me out because we started from literally ground zero with nothing, no instruction, no profession, nothing.
Yeah.
But then I go, well, where did the belief come from? Why was I so stubbornly pursuant of this dream of mine that I had at one point in time for so long? What got me through these the 7-8 gyms that failed, or some could say would fail, and then to continue to go through it? And I can always go back to the lessons that I was given either by you or by Dad, because I remember them, because they were poignant. They were things like, don't get up and make a ton of money going to a job you hate. Get up and get a small amount of money if that's what'll pay you, and live a life that you absolutely love. That has manifested itself as reality, because believe it or not, the gym business doesn't come with a ton of money.
I know.
But the development of individuals, the development of individual growth, seeing a child, like Blaine or Mia or Ronan, at age 5 running around the gym kicking the bags, and now seeing them 14, 15, 18 years old. Disciplined, more disciplined, more strong, more confident than I ever was when I was a kid, because I was like you, I was shy and withdrawn, and like, I don't want to, to take the pain of my own shyness and my own lack of desire for social interaction, but then to take the lessons that you and Dad provided me, and craft a place or a company or a team that rids children of that shyness, that vanquishes that, because it hurt. When I was a kid, I was painfully shy. Like I had no happy thoughts about my future. I was projecting and going, if I can't even try out for football because I don't want to fail in front of these kids, what's the rest of my life looking like? Like I had the power and the mind power to project and to see that, mainly because of things that you taught me, and logic and deductive reasoning and things like that, to go, wow, the future's not looking good for you. You can't even talk to a girl. You can't even try out for the football team.
Can I just say something now?
Sure.
I've told you this before, but for the record, Dad and I would talk about our children when we were alone. You know,
As all parents do.
How are they doing?
Mm-hmm.
What can we do for them? And we agreed that you were a follower. This
Based
is
on what
about
evidence?
the time that you blew a hole in your neck.
I was leading from the front, see? I was charging the front lines. I almost blew myself up with a homemade explosive device.
Yes.
And,
So we really thought you would be a follower. And you proved us so wrong. Happily. You know, you're a leader. And it is because you followed your passion.
I think it's because I didn't want to be a follower. I think it's because I thought I was keenly aware, again, because of the lessons of my youth, about the preciousness of life. And one of the biggest fears that I had as a child was not Freddy Krueger. I liked Freddy Krueger.
I know.
I had Fangoria magazines. It was mediocrity. It was getting, and I still do this. I still walk into graveyards, and when I'm there and I look at tombstones, and I've talked about this with you before and other people, that I look at this little square piece of granite on the ground maybe, and I go, that's a whole person's life. 1898 to 1952. It's like all these experiences that I'll never know about.
Yeah.
Uplifting things, trying things, tragic things, and it's now all encapsulated in this granite slab, and that's it. That's what the world remembers. To me, that was really sad. Now it's not. Now I have a different perspective of it. But then the idea of getting a 9-to-5 job,
Mm-hmm.
and putting all of my planning on enjoying my life in the last 10 or 15 years of it seemed so tragic.
Yeah.
It seemed like such a loss. I always felt like I was living in a society of people who were suffering from mass delusion about what life and the pursuit of happiness really was.
Yes.
And
what was that analogy you used about for the television?
What do you mean?
You would look at the television and talk about how the television is your God, not your God, but people's God, and how
they judge their entire reality based on the images that are implanted into their head through screens that they hold or they stare into.
Yeah.
It is programming.
Yeah.
It's social engineering. And a lot of things are, and that doesn't necessarily mean that television is always nefarious, but it is always programming. It's always changing and shifting thoughts. And now, we live in a world where I would say even the programming isn't even trying to be unbiased or true. It's overtly biased and divisive in nature. But everything that I've ever done has come from words that you spoke, words that you and Dad spoke to me, or actions. And that was it. And I've made choices, but all of those choices ultimately can be traced back to logical, reasonable thought process that were pushed onto me by a mom who loved me and loved science and loved faith and love, and a dad who loved to work and loved to create and loved to share that experience with me.
And wasn't afraid to show his love to his sons.
Not at all. And probably tried too hard sometimes by giving us everything we want, going into debt, and then having to go through bankruptcy to get back to a place of financial footing. But I don't see myself as incredible or amazing. I see myself as a result of my surroundings, my environment, my influences, and ultimately my choices. There's a lot of people that have a life just as blessed as I did, and they make the wrong choices, and it takes them down a slippery slope. I know a lot of people that they parent their kids with love, and they can't stop their kids from taking a downward spiral. Just is what it is. It could be but it's a multitude of different factors.
Yes, it's environment, and it's
And it does take a
genetics,
village. It
and
does take a village at
it
times,
does,
right?
yes.
But I would say that people's caretakers or their parents are the biggest influences.
I would agree with that.
And when uh, our family always led with love, there was never a question that our family cared about each other. Didn't mean we were going to fight tooth and nail about.
Didn't mean we weren't gonna fight.
Right. But
But we did that because we loved you.
a lot of this type of idea, I just read a book and we've talked about it, Think and Grow Rich, and about people's perceptions and perspectives about what rich is. Well, rich in America to most people means extremely wealthy. Rich to me means a fulfilling existence,
Yeah.
right? And I always felt like my experience was very, very rich, which at times was at odds with this painfully shy, socially withdrawn kid. I had these great parents that loved me and worked their asses off for me and tried to help me understand the world in ways, like you don't remember a lot of the stuff probably that you did.
Not.
But things like buying me a Time Life series of books about history so that I could just learn about how things connect together.
Yeah.
Telling me things over and over again, reinforcing to me, it's not about how much money you make, it's about how happy you are in your life and getting up. Those things stuck with me. And when I got to the darkest hours where I failed, and then I failed again, and then I failed again, and then or at least that's the way I could have thought about it. I thought back to myself and went, look at all this. Look at what I've done to this point. I'm not suffering. I didn't grow up in war-torn Rwanda.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm not a Jewish person in Poland in World War II. I've got all this opportunity here. Is your life really that painful? Look at the glass half full. And that was it. Optimism, but also logic and reason was something that you instilled upon me from an early age. And I remember how you used to tell me, Keoni, you're going to be influenced by this rap music, whether you like it or not. You're going to be influenced by death metal, whether you like it or not. And I would go, no, Mom. This is art. This is just musical expression. I know, I'm aware of what it's trying to tell me. And now I know that that's just not true. Now I know that it absolutely does influence you. You had those really honest conversations with me early enough that it set an honest framework of the world, that I could look at the world. The biggest obstacle that I had to overcome was myself, and the fact that my parents were so loving. And they
That's so insightful.
What?
That your biggest obstacle to overcome was yourself.
Well, I think that's true with everybody.
It is.
You know?
I mean, that's the whole thing.
But the tools that I was given, I can recognize that even though we grew up in basically poverty, we didn't have any money.
No.
Presents were hard to come by.
Yeah.
My parents caring and loving me gave me everything that I have. That's all there is to it. If I wouldn't have had that, now I look at, down the road, you sent me to Washington, D.C. when I was 13, and that was my chosen trip, my rite of passage into manhood, so to speak. And what an interesting one it was.
Yeah.
But that type of thing was important enough for you to do, and that type of thing changed the course of my life. It allowed me the opportunity to see that I could take this anger and maybe mold it into something. I could take this social alienation and this shame that I had about myself and turn it into something. And so then when Dad kind of just by happenstance mentioned this guy Bruce Lee, and I saw Bruce, there was this little thing sparked in my mind, like, oh, even though you are a little weak twerp that is afraid to hang out with people and go to birthday parties and do this type of shit, you can be powerful. You just have to train hard.
Yeah.
And so ultimately I'm just a result of good upbringing, choices, and my surroundings. And that's it. There's nothing magical about it. But I do recognize how easily well-intentioned, good-intentioned people, and even people that come from good supportive backgrounds, can veer, because I almost did so many times.
Yeah.
And that's a tough trip.
Well, I have to say that I'm really proud of your children and how you've raised them. They're both disciplined, self-disciplined. I never thought Ronan would be No, he was a little wild child. But
He was. He's
he
matured a
is.
lot
Yeah.
lately. Yeah. I think we're late bloomers in the Koch family. We resist our given establishments as long as we possibly can. So when I moved out on Mother's Day
Yes, you did.
in 1996.
And it was to punish me, I think.
No, it wasn't. It was an act of rebellion because I felt like I knew the rigors of adulthood enough to not have to be constantly chastised about why I didn't get a job and this and that. I told Dad and I told you, and you actually backed me on this. I don't want to get a job. I just want to go to school and finish school, and then I'll accept the responsibility of work when I'm 18 and I need to do so. To me, school, I hated school. And school was a full-time job for me to even bear it, to just go. I hated the experience. I had a circle of friends, a very, very small circle of friends, but I felt alone in school. And there's probably a lot of my classmates be like, really? Like, yeah, we thought you were good. It was a miserable experience for me. Socially, I'm an introvert, so I wasn't having it. And I wasn't really confident in myself at the time either. So I got tired of hearing these arguments from Dad and from you. And I feel like I was getting to a point where I was obviously trying to find my place in the world as an adult or as a maturing adult. And I wanted to show you. I wanted to show my parents, okay, you don't believe I know what it's like out there? I'll show you.
Well,
I'll show you that yeah. Well, and it was miserable. The interest, it was independence, as you know, I'm sure, is amazing. It feels liberating. And like when I moved to Belle Plaine.
Liberating and frightening and terrifying.
And hungry. And hungry.
Yes.
So I moved to Belle Plaine on a whim, essentially. James, like, I'm moving here. And I had a fight or multiple fights about things that I didn't think were a big issue. But the main thing was we were starting to butt heads. My parents and me were starting to butt heads. With Dad, it was about work. With you, it was about who knows what.
You have to finish school or you have to leave. That's what it was about.
Well,
you have to finish school or you can't live.
Well, that's
here
what you
anymore.
always told me. You always told me you're not going to let me just hang out here.
Right.
Right.
And that's what it was about, and that made you angry.
But I had no intention on leaving school, but when I made my decision, I made my decision, and I went to Jeff and I got my transcripts, and I was like, I'm out of here. And everybody, even my friends, yeah, right. Like, you've said that type of stuff before. You're not going. And then just one day I wasn't there.
Yeah.
You know, and I remember leaving and feeling absolutely horrible, not only because I left on Mother's Day and I knew it was against your wishes and Dad's wishes, but I knew that Dad was going to worry incessantly about me. I knew that was going to happen. Yeah. And I also knew that at the time, Eric was like 8 years old, and he was my right-hand man.
Oh, he loved you.
And I loved having a brother. Yeah. I waited to have a little sibling, and then I had one, and we were essentially inseparable. And where a lot of kids can't stand their siblings. You know, if there's 8 years in between, oh my God, driving me nuts. I loved having Eric around. I'd take him with me places. Like, we were really, truly inseparable. I loved watching him, you know, compete in Taekwondo, do all these things. So I felt really like I was abandoning him. I felt like because you left the house early and I knew that, that as long as Dad could see me enough to know I wasn't dead, you would at some point simmer down and understand. But Eric was the one.
Yeah.
That really hurt my feelings, because when I would go 2, 3, 4 weeks and then eventually a couple months from time to time and I wouldn't talk to him, like there were times, I'm not shitting you, I would be bawling myself to sleep because I felt so bad about leaving my family.
Yeah.
And thinking, should you have just stayed until you're 18? Like, I knew how precious time was. And that's one thing that, again, you have helped me understand, but I feel like from a very, very young age, if there's anything special about me at all, it's that I understand the preciousness of every single moment that I have on earth. And the fact that I wasn't there for my brother during a very scary time in his life, you know, adolescence, that tore me to pieces all the time. And I didn't really tell him about it till years later, but it really, really bothered me. It bummed me out bad. But I also felt this need to jump into the world and prove to the world. I felt like I was on a collision course, the minute that I left the house on 400, I felt like I was almost being sucked into this vortex that was, I could direct, but I couldn't quite control.
Mm-hmm.
And at first I couldn't see anything. It was just a dumb kid on his own and loving independence. But shortly thereafter, I got really deep, a lot deeper into martial arts. And then I knew once I hit, 2-3 years later, after I left home and I was now 18 or 19, I was working at McLeod. I got my own house.
Mm-hmm.
I knew where I was going. I knew what I wanted to do. And it was just like inevitability.
Yeah.
But the whole time that I've done all of this stuff, I've always went back and cited the lessons of that childhood that was rough, and parents that were there for me like a rock, looking out for me, even if they weren't always there.
If I can ask you now, how that has affected your life as a parent?
Leaving early?
No. The fact that you give me and Dad all this credit, has that had an effect on the way you parent your children?
Absolutely. And the hope is what you used to tell me and what Dad used to tell me all the time. I just want to give you more opportunity and a better life than what I have. That's what a parent's responsibility is. And so I was fortunate enough to plan my children, and I could never plan how to take care of the kids or what they would do to relationships after we had kids, which is a whole different story.
Yeah.
But I knew when I wanted to have kids. I was careful about not having kids too early, and I still had them too early. But when I did, I remembered the things that I appreciated the most about my parents were love and honesty. I loved the fact that I could feel genuinely cared for and loved by my parents. And I loved the fact that my mom would go, no, that's bullshit. Let me tell you the way things really are. And you would. And, when some of these pivotal memories, but when we were going through your records for the first time and you were introducing me to Hendrix and Joplin and the Doors, and you recounted a story about how you were walking down the road in Hawaii and you were listening to Riders on the Storm and you were like freaked out by it and really scared by it, and left this message. And it sucked me into a time and a place of my mom that I didn't even recognize. And having that kind of exposure, having a mom that would go, oh, I know it doesn't make sense, honey, but the reason that is because everybody was on drugs. And I'm like 6 or 7 going, oh shit. It was a clear and honest view of the world. Mm-hmm. And as a child, I appreciated that. Children are so sheltered now. Or they're not as sheltered now with the internet, of course, but like they were sheltered a lot. And what I found out as a child is you are lied to basically from the time you are born to the time even beyond you get past the clutches of high school and college, and you're still lied to in society about certain things. What do I mean by that? Well, as a kid, everything's magical until you learn that Santa Claus isn't as real as they say he is. And then you find out that the Easter Bunny's not real. And then you figure out that the Tooth Fairy's not real. And then you figure out that politics sucks 100% of the time. And then you figure out that people in power of our country aren't really looking out for the best interest of our world or our country. They're looking out for their own best interest. So by the time most people get to adulthood and figure it out, they're like old. They're older. They're elderly.
Yes.
And I feel like because of my parents' honesty and love, and I think honesty goes hand in hand with love, I was better prepared to see the world for what it is. And I was better prepared to teach my children about the world in the way that it is. The one of the things that stands out about you in teaching me revolves around the Baha'i faith, when I was rebellious against everything. No, it's religion, blah, Mm-hmm. And you go, well, I don't want you to just adhere to this. I want you to go read everything. Go read the Bible. Go read the Quran. Get as much information as you can and make your choice, because this is your life. It's not mine. Mm-hmm. That was incredibly profound to me. That changed my whole life, because most kids, even turning into adults, are just carbon copies to a certain degree of their parents and the people that programmed them. And what you were saying,
there is a right way to do things.
Yeah, what you were saying was, Don't take my word for it. I want you to go look at alternative evidence, and that shaped everything. That's something that I still hold dear to me because I still haven't accepted a religion.
Yeah.
I still go, okay, let me talk. Let's commiserate. Let's talk about your founder. But I'm not going to join your club because I only belong to one club and it's not recognized yet. And that's the club of earthly humanity, shall we say. And those things really, you know, they left an impact on me, and that impact translated to my kids in a way where I was able to be incredibly honest with them. You know, I was able to talk to Peyton and go, Peyton, there's going to come a point in time where your friends very well may impede upon your progress, depending on where they're at in life and the choices that they make. And there will be people out there that say that they want to be your friend, but they're not really looking out for your best interest. Be kind to them. Yeah. Try to help them. But if they start to pull you down, let them go. That type of thing. And even when it comes to politics, you know, going, hey, don't look at this side or this side. Don't adopt my Democratic ideology just because I vote Democrat most of the time. Go look at the other stuff.
Yeah.
Now I feel incredibly blessed to have a perspective that accepts nothing as an absolute.
I'm so glad.
Well, it's limiting.
Because it is all about how each person sees the world, you know, and not trying to fit in, but seeking their own truth. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, thank you.
I'm glad
that was
you see it as
that
positive.
was your intent, I think, was to make sure that I didn't grow up and mature just blindly accepting
into a
whatever
mediocre reality.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like I feel like I've been given a privilege from a very young age to have a mindset geared towards transcendent thought, which is absolutely priceless. You couldn't give me any amount of money to trade that up. You just couldn't. So I'm happy and thank you. And
I'm happy too.
I wanted to really allow you the opportunity to share life experiences, and a lot of the stuff that I heard, I didn't even know. So
really?
it's good for, well, and that's what's so cool about conversing in this type of medium is I want to have conversations with people that prove to other people that we're all coming from the same place.
That we're all real.
Right. And we all live in one planet.
Yeah.
And it's drifting out into the ethos. And if we don't get our shit figured out, we're going to get vaporized. And
on that positive note.
I say that tongue in cheek, but I really believe, and I've told you this before, that I no longer don't believe in myself. Even though I've some people would argue I've accomplished some great things, I still had limiting beliefs about what my capabilities are. I don't anymore. Yeah. And I want to commit my life to promoting the concept and the idea that loving each other on a global scale is the only way that our species will survive. Yeah. And we are geared in a different direction now towards self-fulfilling prophecies and the end of days. And I think if you want to claim to be an empathetic person, you can't empathize with the plight of people living. You have to empathize with all people and the suffering that has happened all through the ages. Yeah. And I recognize and have recognized, because I'm a student of history, that there are people that have suffered in ways I can't possibly imagine, and I owe them an ethical responsibility, to make sure that the world learns from and prevents these things from happening. We need to survive to have some kind of spiritual faith transcendence, and that doesn't mean it adheres to religion. Mm-hmm. It means people need to get connected to the divine.
And to each other, because we're all divine.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because we're all communicating in ways that we don't even know. Ways that are scientifically measurable that most people are completely unaware of.
But if you believe God created the world and everything in it, then are we not all one? Science
can tell us that we're stardust. It can show us that we're made of stardust.
Yeah.
The hang up with God is the word, not the word of God. Don't get me wrong. Not the scripture, this or that. The actual word.
The name God.
The name God.
The picture of a white-haired guy in the sky.
Right. The deity.
That's not the only hang-up.
Well, it's not, but it's a big one.
Yeah.
And the way I say my God's name is different than yours, so we should go to war.
Yeah.
We shouldn't look at the commonalities. We should look at the difference, because you're wearing these clothes, you're accepting these religious, customs. To me, I had this really interesting conversation. I told you about this. I met with a pastor who's one of my best friends. Right. And I met with one of my students who's also devoutly religious and does some preaching himself. And we sat down to lunch, and I'm really fortunate to know these guys, because these guys asked me to go. And they're like, we want to have a little debate conversation. And that's awesome to have people that are like, we're going to reach outside of the church to get the opinions of people. And they knew that I'm, hesitant.
On the fence.
I'm not,
on the fence.
I'm always going to be on the fence, because I'm not going to have a man tell me about my relationship with an entity he can't possibly comprehend. Right. So I sit down, and we're talking, and we're passing all these questions back and forth. And I propose a question to them, and I say, okay, Jeremy Parnell, hypothetically, God comes down from the heavens and speaks to you and says, look, all of the world's ills and religious strife and division that's has come about because of simple human language. This archaic language that has now made this word God. It's supposed to stand for me, but it's used in so many nefarious ways. I command you to find another word in the English dictionary for God. You have to decide the best word for it. What word do you choose? And I knew exactly what my answer was before I asked them. And so they kind of sat back and went, oh, I have to replace the word God with another word, a word that most closely represents what God is taught to us to be. And they were stumped for a minute. The question I proposed took them off guard, and my student came back and did what a lot of people of faith do. They restated the question and threw it right back at me. Hmm. Well, Coach, honestly, I don't know. Let me throw this question back at you. What do you think? Love, Parnell.
Yeah.
Love. Yeah. That's the only answer. That's the only thing that can quantify on the human spectrum. And we are told that God's in us all, and that God loves us, and this and that. And what does it all come down to? That golden rule, to treat other people with kindness and love. I don't know if my answer is the right answer, but I believe it is. And I believe that the most clear-cut evidence that I have found on the existence of divinity and of a creator and of what a lot of people call God or Allah or whatever you want to term it out is love, is the expression unnecessary in a fairly primitive species of love. And when it's unconditional, when I see videos of people driving down the street and going, excuse me, sir, you have a beautiful smile and I like your mustache. I hope you have a great day. You feel something in you that's closer to God than you'll ever feel in your life. When you have a child and you develop a bond with that child, when you have a parent like I had dad and you had dad pass away, that's when I feel like you're at your truest connection. When you understand how powerful that love is. Love is incredible. Yeah. It's so incredible that outside of the amazing good that it does, it also leads to horrible, horrible things when people have imbalanced minds, like crimes of passion. So love is the answer. Love is all you need. And I believe if we had 51% of the population of this world that believes that, our world will be saved. And if we don't, we will perish. Yeah. We'll suffer from our own self-fulfilling prophecies. That's what I think. So that's my mission. And you helped me, you helped inspire that mission, and you helped inspire this. So isn't it interesting how everything connects through the ages, and how actions that you were unwittingly taking part in, or lessons that you were teaching me because you wanted to be a good parent, someday would help fuel a wrestling club.
No, not in my wildest dreams.
Of course, but that is a testament to the fact that we are indeed living in dreams, and that we can do whatever we want with focused thought, hard work, and love.
Yep.
So,
what you project with your mind becomes your reality.
It does. And you know what's so
So-
cool about that? Like when you were teaching me when I was a kid about electrical impulse and how like crazy unknown the brain is, you know, I was fascinated with things like, you know, magic tricks and mind over matter and
Yeah.
concepts like that. And I went, now I don't think of mind over matter as me looking at this and moving it. I think of mind over matter as me thinking about moving that thing and moving it. I don't think about moving mountains in a single bound. I think about picking up a shovel and starting to dig. And in that way, my mind is manifesting a reality.
Yeah.
So people want instant gratification and they often give up on it. But mind over matter is exactly what's happened in my life. I've taken nothing.
Yes.
I went out and researched it and I created this thing. So
Yes, you did.
when people go, oh, I can't do that, I just want to lose my mind. I want to go, I did a lot with nothing, and I know other people that have done more with even less than what I had. So stop talking about these excuses. And if you want something, if you want to manifest a destiny, just go do it.
Yeah.
And if you screw up, you can adjust along the way.
Yeah.
But there's never a right time.
Well, screwing up actually leads to answers.
Of course.
So
And screwing, if you don't screw up, you don't learn.
yeah,
And that's a big lesson in martial arts is like, and that's, I owe a lot of this also to the journey of martial arts itself, because
Yes.
in that journey, you have to get comfortable with uncomfortable, and you are going to lose.
Yeah.
People are going to tap you out. People are going to hit you. People are going to kick you. And in that pain, whether it's ego pain or physical pain, is going to shape you into a better person and help you make better decisions.
if
and
you
learn.
stick with it.
If you stick with it.
Yeah.
And that's why there's a saying in martial arts that you don't ever, if you win, you win. And if you lose, you learn. And
Yeah.
if the only way you can really truly lose is if you just quit.
Yeah,
And a lot of people do. So
yeah, sure do.
now that you have been through all of these life experiences and you've gotten to this point of perspective and more clarity, we're always getting more clear as we age and approach the final destination,
Yes.
which I'm surprised you haven't brought up at this point
I
in time.
was gonna.
If you could summarize the most important things in life to pay attention to not take for granted, and to revel in while they are there, what if this was your last parting word of advice and you were going to pass away tomorrow, what would you want to leave for the world, and what message would you want the world to hear?
Savor each moment. Stop and listen to whoever is in front of you. Be authentic.
That's it.
That's it.
Fair enough. All you need is love.
All you need is love.
Well, Mom, I appreciate you not quitting. I appreciate you sitting through this podcast, and I'd love to have you back sometime, and we'll talk about other specifics like Chicago and the crazy multiplex apartment living conversation. But I appreciate your candor. I think people really identify with vulnerability, and that's kind of one thing I want to touch on. I want people to be able to just like let all this stuff go and speak it to the world.
Mm-hmm.
And it's freeing. You know what I mean?
It is.
It's freeing
Yes.
in a way.
Yes,
So
it is.
I think when people hear about the trials and tribulations you went through and I went through and Dad and everybody else go through, it makes them feel a little bit more at ease at their own situation. So I
Yeah.
appreciate the honest feedback.
You're welcome.
All right, Mama. I love
Thanks for having me.
you. Yes, we'll
I
close
love
the
you
show.
more.
All right. Bye-bye.